we are vibrating to particular frequencies, particular frequency band. And that frequency band is going out. It's represented in our auric field. And so we're drawing in people, places, ways of life and experiences which relate to the frequencies we're putting out. So if you bring this to the big picture, we are living within an energetic sea.
This is Luke Radowski of WeAreChange.org here with the one and only David Icke. Last year we had a very interesting conversation. It kind of went viral on the internet where we talked about ayahuasca and DMT and the secrets of the universe. So I think it's only fair to kind of continue that conversation. And I was wondering, David...
oh, by the way, the last conversation was on a dirty wooden bench in this horrible little area, wasn't it? In Watford.
This scenery here.
This is a slight improvement, right?
A great improvement that David has taken us out here to the Isle of Wight, and it's been amazing and beautiful. The weather's also great, which is very rare here for London. But spiritually speaking, you know, we all go on different paths. Since we last spoke, how is your path? What path are you on now?
Well, I'm doing, Luke, what I've always done, which is follow my intuition and just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and where it goes, it goes. You know, all you can do is have the intent to do what you want to do, the greatest good you think you can do, and trust that that intent will bring towards you what you need to do to make it happen. And you know, there are a lot of myths about spirituality, that, you know, when you become spiritual, suddenly your life changes and you're walking down country lanes with, you know, butterflies flutting around your head and beautiful colors, and, you know, life's wonderful now because I'm spiritual. But actually, one of the things that I was told through a psychic when in 1990, right at the start of my conscious start of this journey, was the spiritual road is tough and no one makes it easy. Yeah. And so there is another myth that the awakening means that your life becomes perfect in your view of perfect. But actually what awakening means is tearing down the layers of programming and perception that hold you in servitude to ignorance. And so there are many times in my life, and they continue, and I'm sure you've absolutely been through the same, where you have challenges and you think, well, what the hell is this all about? But if you look deeper into it, even though it's an experience you might not like, there's a gift waiting once the penny drops. Because I saw a quote today, funnily enough, about your greatest teacher is your last mistake. And so what we call mistakes are just experiences that give us insight, which without experiencing it, we wouldn't get the insight. So, you know, you become a bit blasé about it in the end, because you've been on the journey for so long, and it's like, you know, you're going, well, then there's a problem, you've learned from the problem, you go higher. And that's what I've always done, and that's what I'm doing now. And where it goes is where it will go.
Just like Bill Hicks said, life is just a ride. It's an up and down kind of interesting roller coaster. But personally, one thing I learned from last year is gratitude. And being grateful for what you have every day now. Before I go to sleep, I write down 5 things I'm grateful for, and really putting out the intention of just being happy with what you already have. And if you think about that, it kind of brings in more of that into your life as well. It's a very interesting kind of understanding, interesting kind of paradox. But I know intentions and putting your thoughts to something is extremely, extremely important. We know that it could be used for dark and light. But what is your understanding of the power of intention?
Well, first of all, there's another quote. If you're not happy with what you've got, you won't be happy with what you want. Or if you're not content with what you have, you won't be content with what you want, because it is a state of being. You get these people who get up with the sun every morning to earn more and more money, and by the end of the day they earn more and more money, but they're no happier and no more content. I mean, so, you know, it's very true. Intent, I think, is an extraordinarily powerful energy, and actually it comes back to what I was just saying earlier. If you put out an intent, I want to do this, well, what will happen is, because that intent is a frequency, everything is a frequency, that intent has its own frequency, whatever intent it is. And so other frequencies that sync with it will start attaching to it. And we call these frequencies, these energy fields, people, places, ways of life, experiences, etc. And so when you put out an intent and say, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to achieve, well, what will come back is what you need to achieve it. And we're going back here to, there'll be fluttering butterflies as I walk down country lanes of beautiful colours, because what comes back when you say that is what you need to achieve the intent. And almost every time, what is needed to achieve any intent of greater awareness is deprogramming programmed awareness. And so what comes towards you is often your worst nightmare sometimes. Anyway, and people who are pains in the backside, people that disrupt your life, bring about upheavals and stuff like that. And if you see it in that one-dimensional sense of the experience, you start feeling sorry for yourself. Look, I just want to be spiritual, and I want to do some good, and my life's falling apart. What's going on? Well, what's going on is what you need to get the insight you want. You are having the onion skins removed that are keeping you from that understanding, because it's not a case of seeking enlightenment. We are enlightened. That's what we are. We are all that is, has been, and ever can be. But what the awakening path is removing all those layers of programming and perception control that are keeping us from that level of ourselves, which is enlightened. Mm-hmm. And what experience does, I mean, wise people take experience and learn from it. Foolish people take experience, don't learn from it, and so keep repeating the same things. What's that line? If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And so I think people kind of need to cut the crap about spirituality as if suddenly... I see this lot, Luke, in the New Age. And the New Age, there's some very nice people in the New Age, but it is a massive form of escapism. I meet so many people in the New Age, or I have over the years, not so much now, that that are using it as a form of escape. So they live this life in which outwardly they are portraying themselves as enlightened and happy and joyous and oh, everything's wonderful because I'm spiritual now, but inside they're full of crap. Yep. And it comes to the surface eventually. And until that crap, and it's not kind of condemning everybody, everyone's full of crap, because we're in a madhouse. And we've been programmed by a madhouse since we were born here. So, you know, it's not condemnation, it's just facing facts. And until you recognize the crap and remove it, then you'll stay full of crap. And that's what intent does. You put the intent out. Okay, if you can't achieve your intent while you're full of crap, here's some experiences to get rid of the crap. And you get these people come in your life. You're horrible. Why are you doing that to me? And at the end of it, are you more enlightened? Well, yeah, I am. Yeah, I've learned a lot from that. Well, that was the idea. That's how it works. But we judge every experience in and of itself. When, I mean, I look, and I'm sure you'll do the same. And I'm sure everyone listening to this will do the same. When you look back at what gave you the most in terms of wisdom, expanded awareness. It was something in the moment of experiencing it you didn't like.
Very much so. A lot of growth for myself came from a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of loss with either my health or personal relationships. And I like how you broke it down, because there is this perception of spirituality as this hippy-dippy kind of culture where people just think positively and everything positively happens and everything's happy-go-lucky, when in reality it's about facing your fears, facing your ego, facing your pride, and finding a truest version of yourself where you could really act freely, and I think that's a very important distinction, because it's not all hippy-dippy. But I think a lot of it also has to do with certain frequencies, certain kind of thoughts and patterns that we put out there as well. There was very interesting scientific experiments done on plants. You know, for an example, you know, a piece of lettuce was cut by a specific scientist, and they measured the frequencies, and it was suffering frequencies, it was pain suffering, and all living things have these frequencies. And I think understanding this kind of realm is very important, because these elites, these powerful men, I feel, have grasped it in a certain way. They have certain rituals, they have their intentions that they put out there. Meanwhile, we talk about it, we're deemed crazy and insane and delusional. Meanwhile, the mainstream media, who pegs us as this, doesn't even talk about the politicians who are actually doing this, like in the Bohemian Grove, wearing robes, doing sacrifices, and doing all these insane rituals. So my question leading to this is the importance of frequencies and understanding them. What's your grasp on frequencies?
Well, for me, frequency in the end, frequency is everything, because everything is a frequency. This conversation is a frequency. I mean, and if we were laying into each other, the conversation would be a different frequency. Everything's a frequency, and frequencies attract frequencies. I call it vibrational magnetism, and therefore, what you put out comes back. So when you put out the intent, whatever that intent is, it's represented as a frequency, and it draws in frequencies that relate to it. And so we, at any point in our lives, depending on our state of being, our attitudes, our emotional state, whatever it is, our intent, we are vibrating to particular frequencies, particular frequency band. And that frequency band is going out. It's represented in our auric field. And so we're drawing in people, places, ways of life and experiences which relate to the frequencies we're putting out. So if you bring this to the big picture, we are living within an energetic sea. This can, you know, you can photograph it now. It's, you call it the Earth's energy field, whatever you like. There is not empty space between everything. They are different expressions of an energetic sea. And if you want to affect all the fish at the same time, you affect the sea. If you want to affect all human beings at the same time, you affect the energy sea. Now, when you think that the technological radiation in our energy sea has increased by millions of times in the last 50 years, this energetic sea that we are speaking in now is dramatically different to what we would have been speaking into 50 years ago. And so that's fundamental for this reason. Our energetic fields, what we call people, interact with this energetic sea. And therefore it's affecting us, and it's affecting our state of being. And our state of being then changes to different frequencies. We attract to us like frequencies to what we're putting out. So it is actually not just about manipulating an energetic Earth energy field. It's about manipulating everything within it by what you do to that. And you know, I came across a document a few years ago, written, it was said, by a leading Australian Satanist, as he knew he was dying, And it wasn't like an admission of, oh, I'm just saying I'm terrible. I'm so sad that I did it. No, he was actually glorifying it in many ways, but he was explaining how it worked. And we talked about the children and politicians and all the stuff. But one of the things he said is that they go to particular points within this energetic sea, and a lot of these points are pointed out really by stone circles, standing stones, ancient earthworks, often churches, because churches were built on, many churches were built on old pagan ritual sites, and thus the church is on one of these vortexes within the energetic sea. And he explained how they do rituals at those points repetitively. And as they do them and do them and do them and do them, it changes the nature of the energetic field. It pulls down its frequency. Now, I've been saying for a long, long time that this world is ultimately manipulated by entities that operate beyond human sight. Christians call them demons. The Islamic and pre-Islamic world, where it came from, call them jinn. There's many names from around the world. The Gnostics, the ancient Gnostics, called them archons. And it makes me smile, Luke, you know, when Christians kind of condemn me for talking about this stuff, and he talks about reptilians, he's mad, he talks about entities. So what about these demons in your Bible then? What are they all about? You know, it's written in the books. And these entities are all over the ancient world. You see them described in almost exactly the same way, often exactly the same way, using different names. And they operate in a certain frequency band. And basically, it's a frequency band that is a distortion. It's a bit like a computer virus. You might want to use that analogy. And this force is of itself a distortion. And so what they have to do to have control over the target population is to pull the target population into the distortion. And if you look at the world, it's not only a distortion, it's a distortion to the point where it's virtually everything's an inversion. Everything's inverted. And so you've got the natural order. The natural order of balance is love, kindness, caring for each other. The inversion of that is war, conflict, people dying of hunger in a world of plenty. These are all inversions of the natural order. And so society has been manipulated and continues to be so, not least by infusing the energetic sea with the distortion to pull people into a distorted state. And if you don't understand this, then the distortion completely controls your perception. For instance, all around the world, particularly in America at the moment, but it's coming in many other places, we're having the clearly unfolding police state. We're having the, I mean, YouTube is awash with police brutality, not least out of America. And we're getting more and more imposition by uniforms. Now that's the distortion. It's not the natural order for that to happen, for people to be brutal to each other. That's a distortion. They're expressions of the distortion. But if you then think, well, the only way that we can react against that is by stockpiling weapons and using them if necessary, then you're just another expression of the distortion, because that's not part of the natural order either. Killing is not part of the natural order. Making people suffer, maiming people, it's not part of the natural order. It's a distortion of the natural order. And whether you're fighting for peace or fighting for fascism, it's still part of the distortion. I have this phrase I've used for years: what you fight, you become. And what do you become when you fight? You become an expression of the distortion. And because people who think they're awake are so programmed by the perception of the world that they can see, which is just a tiny band of frequency, the enormity of forever exists beyond that tiny frequency band, and yet from that little sliver of frequency, people think that they can know it all. And if you only see the physical, then the only thing you can think of in terms of meeting what you perceive as a physical situation is with another physical situation. So if we're going to get out of this, we need to understand that it's about frequency, and it's about manipulating human perception, thus human states of frequency, so that we sync with the distortion, and then the distortion's calling the shots. It's like tuning a computer into the internet. It's now feeding you information from which you get your perceptions, your reflex action responses about everything. And when you are working to get closer to the natural order of balance, of love, of caring, of seeking what's best for the greater good and not just for the perceived success or benefit of you, then you start to move out of the distortion because you're no longer syncing with it in terms of frequency. And at that point, the distortion stops influencing your perceptions. And as it stops influencing your perceptions of everything, it allows space for other perceptions to come in, for other insight to come in, because you're now connecting with something that's beyond the distortion. And that's the point where you get insight. It's where when you get revelation of how things are. And of course, at that point, everyone attached to the distortion says you're mad and crazy and insane, because insanity has become, because of the distortion, insanity has become the norm. Insanity is perceived as normal. And therefore, if the world doesn't see you as strange, crazy and insane, then you need to ask why, because it should. I'm delighted when I'm called mad. I think, thank you very much for confirming my sanity. Open your mind and let the information be your guide, not preconceived idea, because people say, you know, in the alternative media, we must stop censorship. Well, stop censoring your perception.
That lesson that you talk about, understanding the frequencies and tuning it into the right direction, it's been something that I personally learned myself after losing my job, broke my ankle, broke my thumb. Girlfriend of 2 years that I thought I was going to marry started breaking up with me and cheating on me, and I went through a lot of problems in my life, and I remember just going through just the most absolute personal pain, and only because of that pain was I able to realize that we are kind of in charge of our frequencies. And that's what made me make this subway video, the Just Keep Going, You Have Nothing to Lose, which is an example of how sitting there on the subway, we have a choice to make. We could either sit there, be miserable, be sad, or we could go out there, open up, talk to people, exchange ideas, and learn from each other. Now this kind of energy, I like to kind of describe it as a spiritual war. I think a lot of people also in the alternative media are also kind of getting the worst of it as well. I think a lot of people in the alternative media aren't tuned in into the right things, and then that they're still filled with ego and pride and fear, and you see that exemplified. So even in our field.
Well, if you want to see internet expressions of the distortion, go on alternative media forums. Yep. And you know, you want to change the world? You are the world you want to change. What are you doing? All this abuse and stuff that goes on. And that's a frequency. It's a very low frequency. Yeah. It's a distortion. It's not the natural order to go on a website forum and hurl vile abuse at people. Yep. It's just extraordinary, the self-denial that people have of what they really are compared with what they think they are.
There's a lot of fear and a lot of insecurity, which leads people automatically to treat others just as bad as they feel themselves in order to get rid of that pain that they have within them. So you see that naturally progressing, but naturally to the people in our movement, the people in the alternative media, what do you think is the most important lesson that they should understand? What do you think that they should know? Because I think that they're caught up in this spiritual war as well, but I think they're caught up in the wrong direction. How can we bring them in the right direction? What can we do? I know it's very personal on an individual basis. It takes a lot of different things in your life to see these things, but what can we do to help people understand this kind of spiritual war that we're talking about?
Well, I like the word war, because that is a distortion as well in its vibration. But it's a frequency tussle, shall we say, of whether the frequency of balance is dominant over the frequency of distortion. And clearly, in the world that it is, the distortion is king. Because how it works is, because it's a distortion, it has great limitations when it comes to what it can do, what it can manifest, what it can create, compared with balance, the natural order. And so it has had to pull its targets into that distortion for this reason, because it is the distortion. It's an expert at the distortion. The people it pulls in are not. They're the experts. They're playing at home in a distorted state. And so what they've created, although they are incredibly limited, is a world in which, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. But if you can open your heart to good intent, positive intent, again, coming back to intent, then you become the two-eyed, third-eyed man, a woman. And at that point, you become more powerful than the distortion. You become able to understand reality better than the distortion. Because when it comes to the occult and the rituals, they are dealing with what I call the intellectual spirituality, if you like, intellectual knowledge of reality, technological perception of reality. Because you can use the word technological for their rituals, because they're very repetitive and they have certain ways of doing things to manipulate energy. But true spiritual, balanced understanding doesn't need rituals to change reality. It just changes reality. It can do it with its thoughts, can do it with its everyday life, because it has a power that doesn't need ritual. Ritual is in so many ways an expression of trying to overcome the limitation that this distortion and its manifestations have of what they can create and what they can do. You know, it's like me jumping off the cliff here and flying against having to go and get in a plane. And so a common theme that I've picked up over the years is that the various expressions of this distortion in terms of entities of various kinds and these Illuminati bloodlines, they're in constant fear of being found out. And they're in constant fear of the truth about reality being understood. Why? Because the game's up. Why is it that, I mean, this was interesting because we all come into this arena from a different direction. Some people come in by investigating UFOs and realizes they're a cover-up, and they step in and suddenly they see this big connected conspiracy. And some people coming through Icke. How I came into it was this. I started to realize 25 years ago, next year, that the explanations for reality that I found credible were not taught in the schools. You never saw them on the television. Science was dismissing them as nonsense. And I started to think, well, why is this? Why is this knowledge, which for me has credibility, and I see all these years later in far, far greater detail what credibility it has, why is it being suppressed? Well, it's being suppressed because we have to be kept in ignorance of who we are and the nature of the reality we're interacting with and how we impact ourselves on that reality and how that reality impacts itself on us, the way we're describing. Because with that knowledge, it's all over. We have to be kept in ignorance. And what's ignorance? Ignorance is an expression of distortion. It's not the natural order to be ignorant. It's the natural order to be all-knowing. And so one of the things I would say to people in the alternative media, or the mainstream of alternative media as I call it, is don't be a mirror of what you're condemning. Don't talk about sheeple who you say close their minds and close their eyes to the obvious fact that there is a conspiracy going on, when you are closing your mind to anything beyond where you are. Open your mind and let the information be your guide, not preconceived idea, because people say, you know, in the alternative media, we must stop censorship. Well, stop censoring your perception all day, every day, because that's what they're doing. Yeah. They are self-censoring their perception by dismissing something by reflex action because it's different to their current belief. And as Einstein put it so well, that condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance. And so people who want to really, really understand what the conspiracy is and where it's come from. And that's important because, you see, you can't divorce a problem from the solution, because how can you find a solution to something if you don't know what the problem is? You don't know the nature of the problem. You know, okay, fix my car. What's wrong with it? I don't know. Oh, well, I'm going to fix it then. And so it's important that people keep their minds open and allow in concepts that they currently would reject. See if they stand up. Don't just, no, just let it in. And what happens if you do, then you start to realize that what you were laughing at and ridiculing and dismissing actually has enormous credibility, far more credibility than the belief system you had before. I mean, I've been ridiculed about talking about non-human entities manipulating our society, and some of them taking a reptilian form and stuff like that, by people who believe that a guy was born to a virgin mother, died on a cross, 3 days later came back to life in a cave, and then went into the sky from a hill, promising to come back on a cloud. You know? Yeah. And I'm thinking, you're laughing at me? But this is it. The programming, belief system programming, does not do self-reappraisal. It just does bleep, 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 bleep. And, you know, the idea that you can get all that you need to know to see how the world works and to make a difference as a result of that knowledge, that all you need to know is between the covers of a book, be it the Bible, the Quran, or anything, and knowledge within this tiny frequency we call visible light, that is insane. to believe that that's all you want. But here we go. If you want to keep people in ignorance, and ignorance keeps them in the distortion, you've got to squeeze their knowledge as much as possible. And there, in many aspects of religion, actually condemn seeking knowledge beyond the religion, right? And then you look at the education system, which is just a programming operation, and you get kids in at a ever younger age now. Some idiot over here in Britain, in the education establishment, is now calling for children to start school at 2, because they want them programmed as early as possible, and they want to get more and more control over them and less influence from parents, and that's for the many reasons for that. So you get them in at the start and you tell them what to believe, what is right and wrong, possible and impossible, good and bad, all the way through. You keep out all the esoteric stuff, you never go there. In fact, you have rules to stop television stations broadcasting the stuff, and out the other end comes an already programmed person, unless they've held their ground, and many young people do these days, but many don't. And then you take that programming through education, and then you add a religion to it, right? And then you add the media to it. I mean, what? You know, what was it? The line goes, you know, if you go to kindergarten and a nice teacher tells you 2 and 2 equals 5, and then you go to school and 2 and 2 equals 5, college 2 and 2 equals 5, university 2 and 2 equals 5, media 2 and 2 equals 5, peer pressure who've been through the same system, yeah, 2 and 2 equals 5. You'll go through your life believing 2 and 2 equals 5, but as Gandhi said, even if you're a minority of 1, the truth is still the truth, because 2 and 2 still equals 4.
Exactly. And that's why I think it's very important for people, especially in the alternative media, to, number 1, humble themselves, and number 2, question everything, and not to be afraid to go places that other people won't go to, but don't claim like you know the ultimate truth, because ultimately no one does. And really, I think it's also a lot of fear and a lot of placating to the audience that a lot of people in this kind of field and this alternative media sphere kind of do, because they're afraid. You know, naturally people play to that fear of, you know, I won't talk to David Icke or interview him or take him seriously, because if I do, my reputation is going to be, you know, ruined or whatever. But ultimately what I learned, and especially from you, you should never be afraid to go to places that other people won't. You should never placate to your audience. You should never change yourself based on outside perceptions of other people. You should always be the truest version of yourself, and the ultimate version of truth is to question everything and not to be afraid to be yourself. And you have definitely taught me that lesson from 25 years now of being just ridiculed and abused, but you still stand there and you've been proven right, and you've helped so many people in so many different ways that it's just really a very inspiring story when people look into everything that you have done. You sold out Wembley before, and you're doing it again this year as well, so that information is going to be in the website below. But David, I guess the last question is very open sourced one, kind of. What would be your message to humanity? One thing that you could say to everyone in this whole world, if they had to listen, what's one thing you would tell them?
Easy then. Well, off the cuff. Look at the world and look at your life. Look at your sources of information all your life, where they've come from, who's decided what information you receive and what you can't receive, and ask yourself if on the basis of that you can possibly have a real fix on who you are and where we are and what's going on in the world. And the answer has to be, well, I can't. Ask yourself how possibly you could know all you need to know by reading a single book. How you could know all you need to know by going through a state-controlled, curriculum-controlled, information-controlled education system, or how you could, through a system-controlled, corporation-owned, information-controlled media. So beyond that, beyond those sources of information is a whole infinite universe of awareness, of insight, of knowledge, of understanding, just waiting to be tapped, just waiting. So it's just sitting there saying, come to me, come to me, come to me. And the system's saying, no, go away, don't go there, don't go there mad, don't go there. And so the choice between remaining a perception terminal of the system's version of everything and tapping into this infinity of awareness is just a choice. Choice you can make today, a choice you can make now. Do I open my mind to all possibility, or do I reject anything that everyone else doesn't believe? And that's the question. And you know, when you are in a crazy world and you make the choice to no longer be crazy, there are challenges, because those still crazy will abuse you, ridicule you, marginalize you, be embarrassed for you. Oh, I'm ever so embarrassed about my daughter, my son, he's become one of them hippies. Well, they're not making you become one, have they, mother? Well, no. Well, shut up then. Let them get on with it. And the question is, are people going to be them, or are they going to be someone else's version of what they are told they should be? And that's the true difference. People talk about freedom. We want freedom. I hear the alternative media. Freedom, free America, free that, free the other. But they're not free, because they're not free to think. They're not free to perceive. They're not free to intuit awareness, because they're censoring it on the basis of their programming. And it's all a choice. It's all a choice. People can change now, this minute, watching this, if they choose. Open your mind, open your heart, go with your intuition. Instead of, what do I think? What do I think? What do you feel? What do you feel? Do that, and your life will transform. Transform, because your frequency changes. When you go with your intuition, your frequency changes, because it's a different frequency to thought. Go with that, and amazing things will start to happen. You won't like all of them, but they'll be necessary. And with every challenge, there'll be the benefit of greater awareness. It's a fantastic journey. People can start on it anytime they want, and when they do, they'll realize what they've been missing.
Very, very well said, David.
Cheers,
Thank
Luke.
you
Always
so
great
much.
To meet you, mate.